I'm Craig Nash, Senior Editor at Good Faith Media.
And I'm Hayoung Park, a social work and theology student.
We are co-hosts of the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast, where we explore and discuss the weekly biblical text and lessons found in Good Faith magazine.
We'll also share ideas for leading group discussions on each week's text and lesson.
Let's dive in. This week's passage begins a series of the book of Amos, and we're going to read Amos chapter 1, verses 1, and then chapter 2, 6 through 8. Amos 1:1 reads, "The words of Amos, who was among the shepherds of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of King Uzziah of Judah, and in the days of King Jeroboam, son of Joash of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake." And then in chapter 2, verses 6 through 8, Amos says, "Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4, I will not revoke the punishment, because they sell the righteous for silver, and the needy for a pair of sandals. They who trample the head of the poor into the dust of the earth, and push the afflicted out of the way. Father and son go into the same young woman, so that my holy name is profaned. They lay themselves down beside every altar on garments taken in pledge, and in the house of their God they drink wine, bought with fines they imposed." And as I said, this is the beginning of an excellent series on Amos. And so right off the bat, Hayoung, what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think it's helpful to get some orienting to what's going on in this passage, even just like structurally. So if you're reading from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 2, where we stopped continuously, what happens in verse 3 is it says Amos name dropping a bunch of these countries that surround Israel and Judah. So we have Damascus, we have Gaza, we have Tyre, Edom, etc. And so it's literally like making a circle around the neighboring nations. And then the mic drop, which happens in 2, 6 through 8, which is, "And you, Judah, and you, Israel, have done these things too." And I think this is such a powerful way to set up the book, because it's from the get-go dismantling the audience's understanding of them as a superior chosen nation. That because God chose them, that they are morally better, spiritually better, whatever, and that if anything, they might be worse than the other nations that surround them.
That makes me think of the story of Nathan and David.
Right.
How Nathan kind of sets up this, hypothetical situation. What if this happened? What if this happened? What should happen to these people?
Yeah, this guy.
And Dave's like, "Go get him."
Yeah.
And he's like, you are that person. I
like,
imagine the Israelites, may have had a similar thought. Yeah, for me, 2 things stand out. One is just, we begin this minor prophet with a lot of specificity. Amos is, first of all, he's naming who he is very briefly, but then he's setting this, I want to say words of damnation, but it's not general. It's like he's pointing to who this is.
Yeah.
We learn right off the bat who was in charge at the time. He names the leaders. We know their names. We know what they did. I think that's key. And it also opens up an uncomfortable kind of conversation that we'll probably talk about throughout kind of this whole series, but particularly this particular episode of the podcast, which is, it's kind of hard to approach these passages without talking about politics, particularly in our current situation. Not just our current situation. It would have been the case 4 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that we can't escape this kind of political aspect of this. And then, my last thought is this reads like kind of a religiously tinged legal document and an indictment of government. It almost feels like Amos is the prosecutor, not just
like a court case.
He's the prosecutor. Yeah, he's bringing this.
Yeah. Also, I think before we go on, it might be helpful to do some like historical orienting, now that I think about it. So it says Amos is talking to Israel and also the kingdom of Judah. And so Amos himself I think he's from Israel, right? And he's talking to the people in Judah.
That sounds.
I probably should have confirmed this, but this is what is coming.
He was among the shepherds of Tekoa. when he saw concerning it doesn't name it in this particular
Yeah.
passage, but he's certainly from one of
Yes,
yeah,
but the one of the key points is he isn't a shepherd,
yeah.
so he's already marginal in that sense, like his vocation. But then he is also talking to an audience that is not necessarily just his countrymen.
Oh, right.
And so that's something I think that is helpful to just keep in mind as we continue to unpack Amos.
And in a moment, we will look at the study. As I mentioned earlier, this is the beginning of a 4-week study of the book of Amos, and it's the curriculum is written by Tyler Tankersley. Tyler is the pastor of Ardmore Baptist Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and he does an excellent job of, we basically asked him to give an overview of the book, pick out a few passages that, hey, what are the kernels that a group could get a good overview of the passage from it, and he is our writer. So what are some thoughts you had of this first in this series?
Yes. First of all, I loved the series.
Same.
In general, it's just really outstanding. I think Amos itself is a fascinating text, so there's a lot to pull from, and Tyler certainly did a wonderful job. Second, one thing is this title of this study is Noticing What We'd Rather Ignore.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, he talks about how Amos, in being this prophetic voice, is embodying a quiet rebellion against, and I'm paraphrasing, the economic habits that numb us. And I think that that is just such a helpful note to start on, because Amos is connecting right worship with right praxis and right to love of neighbor throughout this entire book, and that you cannot have one or the other. And so when Tyler is saying the economic habits that numb us, to me that reminds me that injustice is often invisible unless we go out looking for it, and that like this idea of like the banality of evil, that's something that's been applied to things like the Holocaust, and the idea that some of the most atrocious things that have happened in our human history don't have these red flags that say like, hey, look at me, I'm evil.
Yeah.
We have to have a lens and a particular empathy for the people around us in order to see that.
Yeah, that's so great. Like either begins so kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Clandestinely, like it kind of like injustice falls under the radar. We don't notice it, or we do notice it. And Tyler used the word numb that you brought up. Or we notice it and we go so long without addressing it,
right,
that it just kind of becomes normal.
Yeah, we just think it's normal. And I think that like I think growing up in church, like there are so many ways that I like look back on like the way that I used to read the Bible even, and think and normalize the violence in the Bible as like, oh, I guess like God is loving.
This is how it happens.
Yeah,
this is the world.
Yeah, and now I'm having to unpack a lot of that, and yeah.
I'm particularly interested in this study how Tyler, you could, like all scripture, but especially like minor prophets, you could kind of pick an angle to take, and you could write a million different lessons on every kind of passage. Tyler begins this by taking the angle of Amos, of who Amos is, and more specifically, Amos's, for lack of a better term, lack of qualifications. Like this is kind of an out of the ordinary person that you wouldn't expect. As I talked about earlier, how it's impossible to have these conversations without talking about specific political things that are going on in our world right now. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But I just think that maybe in our attention economy, where most of us probably have made some sort of online comment, or we've made public statements about where we stand on the state of affairs, on a particular political candidate, on a particular legislation, on a particular, regulation, that there's not many people in our world who we don't know what they believe. And it seems like Amos kind of comes out of left field here. And maybe it takes someone like that for us to listen. And Tyler, is it in this when he brings up Wendell Berry?
Yes.
So, and Wendell Berry, I imagine a lot of our audience knows who he is.
Yeah.
Is that kind of
That's
out of
so
left field?
Right. You really can't pin him down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think also the fact that he is a farmer, there's something there of like when you are working closely with the land, the way that you experience injustice and exploitation is very unique. I think that in some ways, like farmers are like inherently prophetic and like
Yeah.
are able to see like both the best parts of our society and the worst parts of our society much more quickly and more intimately than like maybe the average person.
Yeah, we mentioned off mic that just about every mainstream cable news outlet has a person whose job it is basically to go out into the you call flyover states and visit with a farmer
Yeah.
to ask what they think about whatever it is that's going on.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that sets the tone of how prophetic this book is. And we'll be back in just a bit to talk about the study. Before we discuss some ideas for leading a group through this week's text and lesson, we want you to know that we have created a leader's guide to help you prepare.
The Leader's Guide contains an overview of the lesson, some highlights to focus on, and several discussion questions for your group to go through.
For those questions, you can focus on one or all of them or any combination. Also, feel free to adapt them for your particular group's needs.
The Leader's Guide can be found at goodfaithmedia.org.
In this last section, I was talking about how there are these like economic habits that numb us, right? And I think that it would be an interesting exercise if as a group you took one item that you were interacting with. Maybe it's the TV that's in the room that you're meeting in, or if you had like cookies for a snack.
Or if you're
altogether.
using Good Faith Magazine,
Oh.
we didn't talk about this, as your physical copy.
Right.
It happens to that magazine.
Yeah. And so I think as an exercise, like taking that item and just doing some internet research altogether of like what hands labored so that this product could be in your hands today.
Mm-hmm.
Like who are the people that made this product happen? Like for example, let's take like a chocolate chip cookie. It's simple, but you look at the chocolate industry, there's a lot of history there and there's a lot of exploitation that again, we have grown numb to.
And also that you often don't want to because it's chocolate.
Yeah.
Like don't go there.
Yeah. Or same with coffee. And so I think that this exercise, it's something that I've done in my own life a couple times. It's really sobering and even keeping track of my own reactions like, oh, but it's chocolate. Oh, it's coffee. It's everywhere. That is something that's just helpful for me to check in on of like, we've normalized a lot of exploitation in our world.
Yeah. What are the things that might be an interesting thing to say? What are the things that I want to talk about when it comes to injustice?
Yeah.
And the things that make my anxiety go up because I might have to change something about what I'm doing.
Because it requires something of us too. Yeah.
So I'm gonna return to this kind of variation on a theme that I've talked about for the last 10 or 15 minutes, which is this particular passage in Amos and the rest of the book really requires us to talk about how politics and government affairs affects everything, but particularly the most vulnerable among us, and how that is a spiritual conversation. It's not just a political conversation.
Yeah.
I think this would be a helpful time in small groups, particularly if you're studying this in a small group that's set in a church, mostly Sunday school classes, just to have a conversation about, hey, what are our ground rules about talking about politics?
Yeah.
Maybe kind of assessing how have we done it in the past? Have we done it in the past? Have we kind of danced around it? It would be helpful to bring up certain kind of concepts of, hey, we may be afraid to have a political conversation, but there's a difference between having a conversation that's about politics and a conversation that is partisan.
Yeah.
I mentioned off mic too, this is such a challenging thing for people in the United States because of our system of government. In countries that have like a more parliamentary system or really just a multi-party system, when you have difficult conversations, particularly political ones, it's not necessarily if you speak out against a particular candidate, most people don't think you're trashing them.
Yeah, it's not a personal attack.
Exactly. That's not a bind. Whereas here, there's two party options. And in our mind, that creates this kind of thinking that if I am speaking out against one, then I am calling you bad.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think in general, like when we're having conversations around tricky topics like this, it's good to have guidelines and boundaries that you set as a group with everyone's buy-in. So, things like making I statements when you're talking about your feelings, or like, especially when you're talking about political issues, like sharing facts rather than like things that you'd heard once on the internet.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of different guidelines.
I love that I thing.
Yeah.
It made me think of the Saturday Night Live thing from a few weeks ago. I don't know if you
I don't think I saw it.
I mean, it really is kind of funny picture of this happening, and it's a family getting together and a mom wanting to have a conversation with her kids about some things that she's kind of changing her views on. You
Oh,
should go. It's really
okay.
funny. It's basically, and I've talked about being specific, so I'm just going to say this particular character has changed her mind about some things regarding Trump.
Oh.
And she sits her kids down who have always been where she's starting to come.
Yeah.
And it's this, you should go watch it, everyone. It's a funny kind of commentary on how difficult it is to have conversations. And she actually leads the way with this.
Oh,
I feel that
love it.
maybe everything that Donald Trump says isn't the truth. And her kids have a really hard time accepting it from her because of their history and everything. So anyway, I've probably stepped over that line of what can be comfortable, but go watch the video, and it might be a fun thing to watch in your group.
That's great.
And we look forward to the next 3 weeks to discuss this incredible book and incredible curriculum from Tyler Tinkersley.
I'm Hayoung Park,
And I'm Craig Nash.
and you've been listening to the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast from Good Faith Media.
Our music comes from Pond 5.
Each weekly lesson can be found in Good Faith magazine.
You can also sign up to receive a free digital leader's guide.
Learn about how to receive both these resources at goodfaithmedia.org.
There you can find daily news and opinion, various podcasts from our Good Faith Media team and partners, and information about the initiatives that help guide our work.
So visit us at goodfaithmedia.org, and we'll be back next week with another installment of the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast.